It's my contention that today's lesson is one of the most essential of the series. It is about the skill of listening. And to be an effective support person, we must exercise the skill of listening. Michael P. Nichols points out that most individuals think that they are a much better listener than they actually are. In the book of James, the first chapter, verse 19, we read these words: "Everyone should be quick to listen and slow to speak." When we, as supportive friends, listen to another person, we seek to hear not only what the person is saying, but also how he or she feels. Nichols makes a powerful statement about this topic. Listening shapes us. Not feeling heard twists us. Authors Miller and Hall note that listening requires us to stay present and focused. Yet there are numerous factors that contribute to a person's ability and inability to listen. Also, it's worth noting that hearing and listening are not the same thing. We can hear a multitude of messages and yet never truly listen. So let's take a minute to consider some of those dreadful distractions. There are two basic categories of distractions: those that are external and those that are internal. External distractions are everywhere. Nevertheless, we can and have a responsibility to manage our external distractions. A major external distraction in today's world is the dreaded cell phone. When they are in view or even in our pockets, they have the potential to be a distraction. I highly recommend that when you are meeting with someone, you leave the phone out of the picture. I recognize that some of you are on call and need to be available in case of an emergency. Therefore, if you must have your phone available, you will need to navigate this wisely, because it is critical that you make the person you are with feel like he or she is the most important person in that time. Another distraction that many of us have this day is the one that often is on our wrist. It's our watches. Now, when I started visiting individuals 28 years ago, I soon learned just how big of a distraction my watch was. I found that I would just innocently glance at my watch, and the person with whom I was meeting sensed that something that I had coming yet later in my day seemed to be more important than they were. And so I stopped wearing a watch, and I've never worn one again. The reality is that I've learned that in most situations, there's a clock somewhere on the wall. Also, I've learned to schedule my visits so that I have a buffer of time between them. I realize that this isn't always possible. And there are days when it seems like what we have is just back to back to back. Whenever I meet with a person, I want them to know that I have space in my time and my day to be present to them. And so there's another rule about external distractions, and that's about the space in which we meet. If someone were to say, "Come and meet me in my office," and I was sitting behind my desk with a whole stack of papers in front of me, or even worse, my computer screen, that space does not seem warm or inviting. It doesn't allow us to converse naturally. You see, our space speaks volumes about our situation. If you have a stack of papers in front of you, it can simply say to the person, "Whoa, he or she is way too busy to have time to listen to me." Now also, some of the conversations that you may have may take place in a virtual space. So if you are using that modality, you also need to consider your background on your screen. Is that all cluttered as well? Or do you have a background that is so busy that it will naturally detract from somebody being able to focus on the conversation? Think about your virtual background. I try to either have a neutral background or blur my background. I find that that is helpful because I've learned that sometimes what I think is a pleasing background to my eyes may not be to someone else. And therefore, it can cause a distraction. So much of what is spoken in our conversation is without words. Therefore, you must do everything you can to make the space warm and inviting. If you are questioning how your space feels, I invite you to ask over a friend who will be honest with you and give you some feedback. Does this space feel like a place where conversation can be had? Those are just some of the external distractions. I know there's a whole host of ones that we don't have time to cover today. But now we want to look at some of the internal distractions. And while these may not be as noticeable to the one that you are meeting with, their presence is most certainly felt. And like the external ones, these internal distractions come in all shapes and sizes. Let me be clear. There are times when life happens and the distractions just kind of creep in. Internal distractions may include such a thing as a relationship issue. For example, you maybe right before you were going to meet had a heated discussion with somebody who is significant to you. And you didn't have time to decompress before you were scheduled to meet with someone. Or perhaps you're waiting for the results of some medical tests. These are just some of the internal distractions, because perhaps you also have that looming project waiting for you to get done as soon as you've completed the conversation. Or you may have a really important meeting scheduled after your session. Even if you're prepared, you might allow those things to be playing in your mind. We are human beings, not machines. So there are times when shutting off the internal distractions may be very challenging to do. In these situations, it's critical that you own them. Now, this doesn't mean that we announce to the one that we're meeting with, boy, did I have a bad conversation before I came to meet with you. No, it means that we are aware within ourselves that there are other things going on that we're going to have to set aside until after our conversation is completed. We can do this to the best of our ability. But sometimes, as a person, we also need to just recognize that the best we are is the best we are, and we show up as we are. As a Christian, I recognize that the time that I have with this person belongs to God. It's sacred, and I want to utilize that time to the very best of my ability. I ask God to help me. Now, you may, in some other way, seek to really calm yourself before your conversation. Now, during a session, there may be times when you are distracted. I can recall a time when I was meeting in my office and I had my office sign out that I was in session with someone, and yet someone was eagerly knocking at my door. I couldn't pretend that no one was knocking, so I just had to apologize and address the person at the door. Sometimes we have to do that. Also, if you know in advance that some interruption may occur, perhaps you are waiting for that critical phone call from a family member who is waiting for test results. It's best for you then to say that up front. Like, I want to be so present to you today, but I need you to know that I'm waiting for a phone call and I have to take this. And if you had a relationship where you've honored the no cell phone, then he or she will understand that this one must be important. It is necessary for a supportive friend to submit to the needs of one with whom he or she is conversing. Listening is the key to a good conversation. Without it, you're unable to actually do anything of real value or to ask those right questions just at the key moment. Unfortunately, most individuals experience people who are not such good listeners. Nichols state, and I quote, "Contemporary pressures have regrettably shrunk our attention spans and impoverished the quality of listening in our lives. We live in an increasingly hurried times." End quote. Friends, listening is a skill. And much like any skill that we are going to develop, we must practice this. Nichols notes that a major reason why we fail to listen is because we respond without thinking and crowd out understanding. When meeting with someone, the saying is, "It is not about me." We want to be focused on the other individual. And it is okay to recognize that at times there will be space and silence because we want to thoughtfully take in their words, just like we were savoring a wonderful and delicious meal. We want to receive the gift of this conversation. When we practice the art of listening well, we create a safe space for the other to communicate. We allow him or her the freedom to voice what matters most to him or her. The number one thing that individuals seek from conversation is to be understood, to be known. When a person is understood, he or she feels validated and valuable. Nichols writes, "A good listener is a witness, not a judge to one's experience." These are key ingredients into a healthy, supportive friend relationship. Nichols states, being listened to means that we are taken seriously and that our feelings are recognized, and ultimately, that what we have to say matters. As a listener, we are encouraged to view the one with whom we are engaged in as a unique and wonderful person. Individuals can sense when we are genuinely engaged and interested in who they are. Moreover, we need to respect that each person that we encounter is resourceful, capable, and whole. We are not engaging in a conversation to fix the other person. Rather, we are here to learn, grow, and to become more compassionate. Listening involves far more than us just being able to repeat back to them what they said. Nichols emphasizes that listening is an art, and it includes paying attention, taking an interest, caring about, taking to heart, validating, acknowledging, and being moved and appreciating. See, I resonate with Nichols' thought that listening nourishes a person's sense of worth. As a supportive friend, the goal is to hear the heart's cry, to go deep enough to allow for the holy to be spoken. Nichols gives significant attention to the things that inhibit a person's ability to listen when communication breaks down. I want to highlight a few of these issues. The first is this. Communication will break down if you come to a conversation with your supportive friend and you have a preconceived agenda. I remember doing this early on in my career. I would walk into someone's space and I would just know what they needed to talk about. How foolish I was to not recognize that they had something they wanted to offer to me. And by my coming in with an agenda, I simply missed it. I wasn't willing to meet them where they were at. You see, we project into the conversation when we come with an agenda our own needs rather than that individual's needs. The next factor in breaking down of communication is our time restraints. As a supportive friend, you will have unexpected visits. Now, I've adopted a practice, and this is one that I have found invaluable in my life. If someone stops over to my office unannounced and they really need to talk, and yet I have something else that I must attend to, I've learned that it is best to say to them something like this. I can see that what you want to share with me today is really important to you. Unfortunately, I already have another commitment that I need to get to in the next 5 minutes. But because I sense that what you want to share with me is really, really significant to you, let's schedule a time where I can be fully present to you, that I can hear what you want to share with me, because I'm excited to listen to you. I've never had anyone feel that they were unvalued in that moment, because what I'm telling them is quite the opposite. I value you so much that I want to make the priority to meet with you at a time that is convenient so that I can really listen. Now, another issue that occurs in communication is what's called transference and countertransference. Perhaps you've encountered a situation where you meet with someone and you just don't seem to connect. And you're wondering, what is it about this situation? Well, it could be that countertransference or transference has occurred. Nichols defines transference as the way in which a speaker's experience of a listener is unconsciously organized according to pre-established expectations. On the other hand, countertransference is defined as the listener has an emotional reaction that interferes with hearing what is being said. When listeners are in the grips of countertransference, mature responses like empathy, perspective, humor, wisdom, concern for the other person are distorted through the prism of the listener's emotionality. Another way to express this is, when do you hear the voices of someone from your past? If, as a supportive friend, the voice that you are hearing from the one you're conversing with brings up a whole host of previous voices, you are probably encountering countertransference. Now, how can we address these issues? Because the reality is they're going to happen. You can't possibly shut off all the old tapes of your life and never experience transference or countertransference. Well, the most important thing that we can do is that after we meet with someone and we've experienced that, is for us to take a step back and say, I wonder what that was about. What brought that up in me? You're looking for the root of why these feelings emerge. And this will aid you in avoiding similar feelings in the future. The key is to identify where this was bubbling up from. Now, others find that listening is inhibited by preconceived notions. As a supportive friend, I encourage you to make a mental note of the times when you expect someone to respond in a particular way. Now, some of our relationships, we often feel like we could complete someone else's sentences, which we never want to do. We need to be ready and anticipate that they're going to say something different than we might anticipate, or that they might offer us some new information. You see, when we come expecting a certain kind of reaction, we may hinder the relationship and that person's personal growth. We need to approach a conversation with the desire to discover. Remember, every conversation is an adventure. We're there to seek to learn and companion the individual. We're not going in thinking that we're mind readers. I also want to be reticent of those times when I am going into a conversation and I have needs that I want to have fulfilled. Friends, it's critical that I do not come to a conversation thinking that somehow this person is going to fill up my bucket today. It is in those times that we can slip into advice mode. Maybe I want to think that I'm important today, and so I'm going to tell this person everything I know so that they can help me to feel good about myself. That doesn't honor the one that I'm visiting with. It also assumes that I know what is best for him or her, when clearly I haven't lived a minute in their shoes. Now, this next thing that I have to offer to you about listening may seem way out of bounds, but listen, hear me out. Honesty isn't always a good thing. You say, whoa, I don't agree with that. Well, let me say this. Most individuals would say that they desire for one with whom they're conversing to be honest with them. Nevertheless, offering an honest opinion is not always beneficial. By that I mean that timing is everything. If I tell a person that the idea they've just offered to me is absolutely ridiculous and in no way should they go forward with it, and I haven't already built a trusting relationship, this will inevitably wound the relationship. So much so that that other person may stop sharing what really is on their heart. It is crucial that a person feels safe enough to share with us their brainstorms. Now that may seem like we should always tell them when their brainstorm is not a good idea. I agree that if they're putting themselves or someone else in harm's way, absolutely we must be honest. But there are times where they just need to say their dreams aloud and have someone listen to them, not to evaluate it at that point. I want you to imagine this scenario. Maybe get at this slightly different. In lifeguard training, lifeguards are taught that they should not jump into the water too soon to rescue an individual. Now at first, again, hearing that, you're like, why wouldn't they get in there and help the person who is in need? Well, because if one jumps into the pool too soon and the person is so flailing about, it is likely that both individuals may drown. So we need to wait till that individual is ready to accept help. As a supportive friend, it is unkind and unhelpful to rescue someone who isn't desiring to be rescued. Along with not rescuing is not interrupting. As I've already said, too often we want to jump in because we know what that person is going to say. But I want to give you an acronym today. It's WAIT, and it stands for Why Am I Talking? So if you are jumping in too quickly, think about that. Why am I talking? So what makes a good listener? First, it is taking a genuine interest in the person with whom you are communicating. One of the greatest gifts that we can offer to another person is to be fully present to them. I believe that that is one of the wonderful gifts that we can give to another human being. Nichols writes, genuine listening means suspending memory, desire, and judgment, and for a few moments at least, existing for the other person. Another key to listening is to listen with your whole being. Miller and Hall suggest that one should focus on what is said and what is not said. As you were hearing the person, as you were deeply listening, did you sense their energy level rising or lowering? What was their body language? Were they open or are they closed? Or their tone of voice? Did all of a sudden they become very serious? And what is the flow of the conversation? Are they excited or does it seem to be lagging? Now next, the art of listening requires that we do just that, listen. As a supportive friend, one should follow this very basic rule. It's an 80-20. We should be listening 80% of the time. Only 20% of the time should we be asking questions or seeking for more information. Remember, as a supportive friend, one should not expect to have his or her listening needs met in the conversation. Think about it this way. If you went to the doctor and your doctor started to tell you all of their medical needs, you would wonder why you were probably seeing that particular doctor. The same as a supportive friend. If you go in there and you start to unload and unpackage all of your personal needs, that person may wonder why you are there. Another factor of good listening is largely empathetic, which entails being attentive, largely silent, following, not leading. It's like dancing, and there in the lead. It encourages the speaker to go deep into the experience. Good listening welcomes the other to say more, to expand. Remember, the goal is for that other person to feel understood. Empathetic listening allows the other person to explore the depths, and sometimes all we need to say is, uh-huh, or I see, or would you like to tell me just a little more? It frees the person up to feel like there is a spaciousness in the conversation and that they have your undivided attention. It's important that as an empathetic listener, a person balances between thinking and feeling. Nichols indicates this. This requires a deliberate shift from feeling with a speaker to thinking about the speaker. What is that individual saying? What is the meaning? What is the feeling? You are there to help the individual be positioned for his or her personal growth. If I feel so deeply with another person, I may be incapable of supporting them, of building them up, of encouraging them. Also, as a good listener, we need to be comfortable with silence. Allow a person to also think and process. Both, and I emphasize both introverts and extroverts need space in a conversation to think. Remember, the goal of the conversation isn't just to keep the conversation going, just to have constant battering back and forth. No, allow for the quiet and don't force continual dialogue. Friends, listening is not an easy task. It requires attention. It requires practice. It's okay to recognize that this is something you want to grow in. Remember that being a good listener is essential to being a supportive friend.